is all, for the most part, you just lost your ability to compensate when you got COVID, right? So we were having this conversation earlier. A lot of the post-COVID stuff is about these tiny, tiny little micro infarcts. So they're not quite strokes, except they're strokes. You know what I mean? When you have a stroke, you have like a big blob of nasty stuff that plugs up a vessel, plugs up an artery or a vein, and it like messes up all this stuff downstream.
Right.
Just imagine if that were happening at the level of just a handful of capillaries. You know what I mean? Just like tiny, a couple of red blood cells that get stuck together and they plug a hole, right? And you take out a few cells downstream from that, like handfuls of them instead of millions, right? Now the problem with that though is that if it happens all over the place, it messes up some pathways and messes up their endurance. Okay. Now the systems that tend to get the most affected are the parts of the cerebellum that regulate all the vestibular stuff. We know that was ground zero for you. And then the stuff that affects basal ganglia. And basal ganglia is about attention, focus, regulating anxiety, ADHD, things like that, right? That doesn't look that bad. That stuff actually looks fairly okay. The brainstem cerebellar stuff looks more messed up, right? And again, you had this whole scoliosis thing that I'm positive came from that, those roll reflexes. I mean, that's that imbalance. Like, if you look at it, everybody can see it, right? So I think really what's happening here is that you had COVID and it messed up your ability to compensate for all that stuff. And unfortunately, that's all living in a part of the brainstem that regulates all these autonomics. And now your autonomic regulation took a dive, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that stuff. And I'm saying that mainly just based on the fact that you've already had a pretty comprehensive workup and you've checked all that stuff off, right? I think it's just not being driven correctly by the part of the brainstem that we can see is just not cool. I mean, you don't have a gag reflex, dude. I was smacking your uterus.
I know, I was gagging watching you do that.
Right? Okay, that means that part of the brainstem's just not in the game. Okay, so that's what we got to build up. Okay, so came up with a plan.
And that will in turn help her, the GI too.
It should.
It's been so awful.
If I'm right about that being the whole thing, yeah, you'll see that come back. Right. Okay, so again, like I said, anybody that says for sure they can fix this stuff, they're lying, right? But this is literally the stuff we treat here successfully all day long. Okay. Now, if there's more complicated stuff going on in the background, like MCAS and autoimmunity and things like that, that can make it a little bit more challenging and a little harder to fix. It doesn't mean that we can't still move you forward. It usually just takes a little bit longer, right? But I don't really think that's your game. I don't. I think you're all that inflammatory stuff we were talking about. I think it's just because you've got gut stasis and your gut's leaking, and that part of your brainstem just sucks, which controls the whole thing to begin with. You know what I mean? And I think if we get that back in the game, I think you'll see all that stuff improve.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. So
Game on.
came up with exactly right. Okay, so we were going to have you work with Mehul, the guy you spoke with. He had a family emergency. Apparently, he's gone next week. We just found that out. But that means you'll be working with one of my other associates, Nick. And Nick's great. He's Mehul plus about 1.5 feet, right? Yeah. And he's fixed all this stuff. I mean, it's not a problem. It's not a downgrade or anything like that. And so we're going to be working on you pretty heavily. We're going to push you right up to your fatigue threshold and then stop a whole bunch of times, right? So when you go home, crash, don't make like a whole pile of plans for the evening or anything like that. Try to stay away from screens as much as you can stand when you go home. And then other than that, off we go. All right.
Should you be staying off screens pretty much anyway, right now?
Well, we can see the scrolling makes you worse.
Yeah.
Right. Also, when you got light that's blasting into your face, it's telling your pupils to constrict, and we can already see that you're not having fun there, right? So it's not going to make you worse, but it's going to fatigue you faster, right? And when we're pushing you, like just really try to limit that as much as you can. Take your phone, put it in night mode, turn the brightness way down, and then just try not to scroll on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. What are you guys doing for the weekend? Research shows that if you mess your kidneys up, or if you just grow really fast and things like that, all of a sudden your kidneys are putting out an inappropriate blood volume, and you will have a renal compensation over time in 5 months, right? If I suddenly start drinking 2 liters of water more, right? I'll spend 5 months in the bathroom until my kidneys learn to compensate for that being my new normal, and then I stop and suddenly I'm dehydrated if I'm not getting those two, right? So he's just trying to help you with that, right? Now this is different though. We're going to find those angles, and then we're going to find the angle where you start falling apart at, back you off a touch, and then we're actually going to fix the problem at that angle. Okay. So this isn't just like hoping that you're ultimately going to put it together at those angles. We're actually going to make it go away. Right.
All right.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other questions?
Yeah, only other thing was who I saw my very first appointment today, we talked about like diet, supplements, all that, and he suggested 2 supplements. So I guess do I get those today?
With those Neuro 2,
probably. It was Histo X and Neuro.
Yeah, so the Neuro 2 stuff is about just helping you get capillary dilation so you get a little better blood flow to the brain. That's worthwhile. Dive in on that. The Histo X stuff, that's just a big, that stuff really helps with people that have MCAS, if that's the story. Okay. I'm not convinced on that one, but if we have 2 days, it's a great time to figure it out. Okay. Now, don't do the Neuro 2 yet. Start with the Histo X. Okay. And if you take that and you feel better, well then, yeah, we can make the assumption that there is some histaminergic stuff going on in the background. Okay. So take a pretty decent dose of that. All right. Do like tomorrow, do 3 capsules 3 times a day. Okay. And if you feel better, now if you take the first dose and all of a sudden you feel like you did on the antihistamine where it just zones you out and everything else, well, forget that. Don't keep going on it. But if that doesn't happen and you actually feel a little bit of improvement, that tells us a ton. Okay.
Should she try that and try to eat regular food? Because she's been so low histamine food, it's like crazy.
Don't make any changes. Just keep doing exactly what you've been doing.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, she's been avoiding everything with histamines for so long. I think if she put something else in her body, it would make her freak out anyway.
Well, we just don't want to make any changes right now.
Yeah. Where can we get those? Like, oh, great. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.